everyone. Welcome back to the Just Justine Time Podcast with your host, Justine or Kitty Cat 23, depending on where you know me from. How's your wonderful day going? Is it going good, bad? No matter what, I hope you're getting through it. I hope each and every one of you guys had a wonderful Christmas or holidays. I know I did. I still have all of my Christmas stuff still set up. I'm kind of one of those people that don't take down their Christmas decorations until like February. So probably in a couple episodes, you are definitely going to see some Christmas stuff in the background. But trust me, it is January. Hello. What is everyone's New Year's resolution? If you want, comment down below or tell me about it, because my New Year's resolution was to get my health in order. Essentially, I've been eating really bad, and I feel like the more I grow older, the more I feel the need to actually, work on myself, or else I'm going to crumble. So yeah, one of my resolutions is essentially just to be more active. By active, not working out, because, everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna lose so much weight, and then they never do it because it's too much of a commitment. For me, I just want to move around more. I want to just become more active. I feel like I sit too much, if you know what I mean. But regardless, on today's episode, we are going to be talking about multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder. Fun fact for you guys, if you do not know, it is no longer classified as multiple personality disorder. Nowadays, it is termed in the DSM-5 as dissociative identity disorder. I'm not exactly sure why they made the change, probably because multiple personality disorder can be considered offensive because it's not necessarily their fault that they have multiple personalities. It's just kind of what happens. So if you guys don't know I'm just going to say DID. Every time I say DID, it is going to be dissociative identity disorder. So with DID, it is essentially a escape from reality. A patient or person who has this, it's very unhealthy and it's a hard coping mechanism, but essentially what happens is that they dissociate from reality. They cannot tell the difference between their surroundings, their identity, their memories. It's essentially a way to escape from reality. So why does this happen? A lot of people are like, I find that if you talk to a lot of people and you kind of explain, oh, well, what do you think DID is? A lot of people tend to think that people with DID are crazy, and that's not actually true. I've never personally met someone with DID, but I do know that someone that I know in my life, her friend actually has DID, and we'll get into it a little bit later because it's actually an interesting concept to talk about. But yeah, so with dissociative identity disorder, it's usually a reaction to trauma or something major that's happened in someone's life. So essentially what happens is if a huge traumatic thing happened to someone, your brain basically goes into shutdown mode and doesn't want to relive those memories. So in turn, your brain will make a split personality, and with this person or the next alter or identity doesn't know anything about this trauma, and that's essentially what it is. It's an escape from the traumatic thing that happened. So some symptoms of DID is essentially amnesia, all the way up to alternate identities. So DID can be as small as just forgetting certain things that happen in their life to go as far as different alters and identities. And if you don't know what alters are, it is a coined term in the DID community where you can have a bunch of different alters, which is essentially just your different personalities that are split. So essentially, let's say if I had DID, I could have 3 different alters, and usually you have your main alter, which is the one that presents itself the most. And each case is different. Some people know about their other alters, some people have no idea. It really depends case to case. So say me, I would be Justine, an alter could be like Jacob, and another alter could be like Samantha. And as they present themselves, they are known as alters. And Jacob could be like a guy. I could be like a guy who really likes dogs, and Samantha could be really girly who likes flowers. And they have no connection to each other. Like I said, it does go from case to case. Some alters, some people claim that they can talk to each other, some people don't. It really depends on how bad your brain was affected from the traumatic event. And usually symptoms worsen between times of stress, making the symptoms more obvious. So if like triggers come up or something stressful is happening in their life, most likely another alter will come out. So now there is 2 different kinds of dissociative identity disorders that you can have, again ranging from either just amnesia to different identities. So the first one that is just amnesia is called dissociative amnesia. This is the main symptom of memory loss due to a traumatic event. It's more severe than just general forgetfulness. It can't really be explained with any other medical condition. So essentially to get diagnosed this in the DSM-5 is if you go through a very traumatic car crash where your family dies in the car, let's say, and you're the only survivor. Most likely, instead of just normal amnesia, because there is different things of amnesia that you can get retrograde amnesia, you can get, I forget the other amnesia, but there's a bunch of different amnesias that you can get due to traumatic experiences. But basically, if a patient or a person goes through that and has no recollection of anything and it persists on for months and years, then you're most likely going to have dissociative amnesia, because with retrograde amnesia it comes back after a while. So that's what it means by no other medical condition, as well as if you didn't have any amnesia or any forgetting medical conditions before that. And yeah, especially like I was saying, you can't recall that time of the trauma, and sometimes it can affect different aspects of your life, depending on how severe it is. Like I said, if your parents get into a car accident and you're the only survivor, sometimes dissociative amnesia can go as far as completely wiping out the memories of your family, which is pretty scary to think about, that you completely forget that you had a family. But it does happen, and it is not that uncommon that it can happen. So with dissociative amnesia, like I said, it also can come up in different events. So essentially you can go with periods of not remembering. So you can have amnesia that occurs suddenly that can last between hours to weeks to even months. But that's pretty rare if you get to the months part. So it's essentially different triggers will make you forget certain things. It also may, it can be as severe as you have dissociative fugue, which is essentially where you will go traveling or wander away from your day-to-day life. That is like, it's a little different than dissociative amnesia, but it's essentially where your brain is basically telling you to go on a plane and never come back. I know a lot of people have that once in their life, to just get on a plane and leave, but with dissociative fugue, it is essentially where your brain thinks that that is the right thing to do because you don't know anyone in your life already, even though you do. And like I said, it can last up to hours or weeks, so usually people can snap out of it. And could you imagine being in like Thailand, just snapped out of it and just be like, where am I? It's pretty scary to think about. But usually when you hear the term DID, you think about dissociative identity disorder, and that is, again, it is known as switching and alters. It is where your brain goes through a traumatic event and so therefore creates different personalities than you may know. You may feel, people with DID may feel like they have different people living in their head, again, depending on the case, which, is really interesting to think about, because I can't imagine having like 3 different people in my brain. I can barely deal with my own self-talk, so could you imagine 3 or 4 other self-talks? It could be crazy, I think. And like I said, each identity or alter has its own unique personality, its unique name, even mannerisms. So going into mannerisms and that stuff, like I was saying earlier, is someone that I know, her friend has DID, and she has been in and out of psych wards all of her life, but something that really stuck with me was that this person who has DID has, I think she said 4 different alters, but what really gets me is 2 of them. So one of her alters does hard brain, like hard drugs. What she was saying is that this alter would do, like, if she could get her hands on it, she would do like meth, she would do heroin. It would be like really hard drugs that are very addicting and hard to get out of. But get this, if she switched her alter, that alter didn't do drugs. And she actually didn't feel a need or a craving for any of the hard drugs when she was switched. It was only that specific alter that needed the drugs. And like with different patients, it could be as minimal as like one alter needs glasses, another alter needs to wear makeup. It's as minimal as that to as severe as drugs. But it's an interesting topic to think about, because if your brain can switch like that, then why are drugs so addicting? But yet if you have DID and have two different personalities, and one does a drug and another one doesn't, and doesn't even feel the need to do it, then what is stopping us from just cutting off drugs cold turkey? Of course it's the withdrawals, and it's the delusions. Like, I know if you're really hard into alcoholism, like if you've been an alcoholic for years and years and years, I do know that you get delirium tremors if you try and withdraw from it. If you do not know what delirium tremors are, it is essentially where you shake, kind of like Parkinson's, as well as you get very disorientated and don't know where you are. But the fact that this friend didn't get any of those is, I would really like to see more studies on it. I know with DID there is not many studies, because not many people get DID in a year. So it's very hard to study it, but it's interesting, because I feel like the discovery of that could make you think that, like, you know how in karate and in like martial arts and stuff, how they say like mind over matter, like it just puts your mind to it and you'll be able to like break cement blocks and stuff. I feel like that is kind of the same scenario, where if you just like switch your brain, you will be able to not have these cravings. I know it's a hard concept to wrap like your brain around, like even mine, it's hard to even explain this, but for me it's just like, you know how people like from day to day say like, oh, I can't change, like it's just how I grew up, it's just how things happened. It's like, but then you take scenarios and situations like that and you're like, but are you? Like, is your brain actually rooted to one thing? Like, I feel, in my mind, I feel like you can change completely who you are if you work on it long enough. Like, in psychology, we do learn fake it till you make it, essentially. And if you don't know what I mean, it's essentially if you think happy thoughts and if you think that you're going to be confident at something, you're most likely going to be confident in it. I know in medical fields, doctors, or if you watch Grey's Anatomy, you would have seen it. It's called a superhero stance. And if you don't know what a superhero stance is, it's essentially where you put both of your hands on the front of your hips and puff out your chest and roll your shoulders back and you smile. You smile really big and you're like, this. And you do that and you do some really big inhales and exhales, and it actually is supposed to calm down your mind and actually give you a false sense of confidence, hence why it's called the Superman pose. So if you ever are going to do like a presentation, or you have like, if you're in the medical field ready to do a surgery and you're nervous about it, do the superhero stance. It does look weird to others, but at the same time, you just do not want to be stressed in certain situations like that. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about. And, you know, I always beat myself up because I'm a lazy person. I don't know if you guys know, I do try and work hard, but laziness does get the best of me. And I always think back to DID cases, as well as just different psychology things that make me think like, it actually makes sense that if I just get off my butt and go to the gym, I can just do that. There is nothing holding me back. And it's the same with drugs. Like, if you think about it, like, don't get me wrong. If you are struggling with getting off of hard drugs, whether that's cocaine, meth, Adderall, whatever it is hard. But it's really interesting to think about that there is technically a little bit of evidence that you can really just cut cold turkey and just be like, you know what? No, I don't want any more of it. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. It's pretty interesting. Anyways, going back to DID, most people who do have the alter switches also have dissociative amnesia or dissociative fugue. Like I said, the fugue does go hand in hand with the alters, because one alter may think that they live in Japan, but another alter thinks that they live in Canada. So if you switch to the alter that lives in Japan, they're going to want to go to Japan because they're not going to think that they're living there. There has been a case study done that I read up about that basically it was a person who had 2 different personalities, 2 different wives, and 2 different jobs. And they would switch so suddenly and so fast that I guess they never had a problem, that the one alter would go to their work, come home to his wife, and then the next night he would go home to the other wife and go to the other job because of the switch. And like I said, people with DID do not have really any control of these switches. There are people on TikTok that do claim you can switch, but everything that I've read in psychology, switching only comes up with traumatic events or triggers. There is no way that you can really just dig in your mind and bring out the other alter. Though, yes, a person can talk about the other alter if they know about it. Like I said, some DID cases know about them, some don't. So if they do know about them, they can talk about the other one, probably can even talk about what they're thinking, what they want to do, but they can't actually force them out. There is a TikToker called Alter Ego, I think his name is, and he has, I think, oh goodness, I don't know how many alters he has, but he does have quite a few, and he talks about it a lot, and he's known to get rid of the stigma of DID, which is pretty good, though there has been recent stuff saying that he is faking it, but I'm not sure. I'm not going to say that. But if you guys don't know, on TikTok there has been so many people faking DID. It actually got on a news article or a news headline, the fact that there were so many people who were faking DID that people who actually had DID were getting really upset because they were bringing the stigma back to it. Also, if you think about it, if you know the movie Split, or was the other one Broken? I forget. I do know Split. I forget what the prequel was for it. But essentially, there was a lot of critics and a lot of people in the DID community actually criticizing it, saying that it's bringing more of a stigma back to DID and that that's not actually true, which is fair, because if you dive into Split, spoiler warning, if you haven't seen it, feel free to skip like 10 seconds. Essentially, the guy turns into a beast because one of his alters is an animal who can climb on walls and stuff, and who is like a psycho. And a lot of people with DID get really upset with that, because in the movie Split, he has, I think it said 22 different alters. That is very rare. It is very uncommon for people with DID to have more than like 5. You can have a lot more, but essentially each alter connects to a different part, a different like traumatic part of your life. And in Split, it's like shown that, you know, he has a kid personality, a smart personality, normal personality. I'm not saying normal, I'm saying his main alter and all of that stuff. But yeah, it seems to get a little crazy considering how often he switches. There is people who say that you can't switch alters that fast, that alters usually come and go within a couple hours. I'm not exactly sure. I would really love to interview a person with DID to get more info on the subject, because this is one of the mental disorders that there is not much known about in psychology. We just know the bare minimum, and that's probably why there's a pretty huge stigma in the world, is because there's not enough information about it. With that being said, there is actually a movie that depicts a true story about DID that I actually watched. It is a very old movie. It's from 1957. I can't really say it's that old, because I feel like there's people watching my podcast being like, I was born before that, or I was born just a little bit after that. But when I say it's pretty old, when you say 1957, that was literally more than 50 years ago. Holy crap, we're all getting old. Let's just have a little existential crisis right now, because we all realize that movies are becoming so old now. Like Avatar. If you guys don't know, Avatar came out December 16th, and it took 10 years for them to make the movie. Or I think it was more than 10 years. I'm not sure. I watched the movie. It was absolutely amazing. I loved Avatar. It was my dad's and I's favorite movie growing up. When he used to truck drive, that was like the only movie we would watch in his little DVD player. So I love Avatar, and I think Way of the Water, they did a great job with it. But like I said, the movie was made in 1957. It's called The Three Faces of Eve. The movie is actually in black and white, which is really interesting and crazy to think about now that everything's in Blu-ray 4K color. But it is essentially about a wife who lives in her house with her husband, and the husband starts noticing that she has this weird personality coming out, that she has two different personalities. And one, I forget exactly, it's been so long since I've watched it, but essentially one is really, I guess, mean and cruel, while the other one is like, the normal wife who he knows. And again, spoiler warning, if you do want to go watch the movie right now, feel free. Again, skip ahead like 30 seconds. But with that being said, I'm going to spoil the ending. It turns out that she does go to a therapist, and the third face comes out, and that is a little kid. I don't remember her name, but it's essentially, she talks in a little kid tone. She says that she's scared and that she wants her teddy bear, and it turns out that she dealt with a huge traumatic event in the movie, that at the time of that event she was that age. So her little kid alter only came out because the therapist pushed her so hard that it finally triggered the little girl to come out. And it's funny because the little girl knows everything about that traumatic event, while when you go back to the other faces of Eve, they have no idea that even happened in their lives. Now, going back to DID, and with that, what I was going to say earlier is that, yes, usually people with DID do have a secret alter, and that alter is known to be them at the traumatic accident. So, like, again, if we go back to the car crash, if you were, say, 6 years old when that happened, you'll most likely have an alter that is 6 years old who is traumatized from that event. Or you can have the exact opposite, where you have a 6-year-old alter that happens before the event, and that is like their safe alter, where they go into that alter to feel safe, that like, I'm just a little kid, nothing can happen to me. Like I said, it is the most complex mental disorder there is out there, because for each case it's completely different, and again, there's not much info on it. Though there is a little more info on a different disorder which does tie hand in hand with DID, but this is called depersonalization disorder, and this basically involves an episodic sense of detachment or being outside of yourself. So this is essentially people who say that they dissociate. This is kind of one of the symptoms that you can get with depersonalization disorder. It's essentially, when you're in third person, or I think the best way to describe it is, if you've ever dreamed about yourself, you see yourself looking from like the top in. You know what I mean? Like, you see yourself from like a sky view. You don't see yourself first person. And that's essentially what depersonalization disorder is. It's where you lose your sense of self, your sense of identity. And it feels like you're watching things through a movie or like a dream, where you don't actually feel like you're present in your day-to-day life. And yeah, you may feel detached or groggy. People who are in a dissociative state has an altered sense of time. Time could be either sped up or slowed down, kind of like in a dream. I do know there is different people who dream differently. I myself have really vivid dreams. I can remember dreams for a very long time. Don't get me wrong, I can't remember every part. Like the dream I had this morning, I know I was in an apartment, and that's it. I forget everything else. Though in the back of my mind, I do know a lot more happened in my dream, I just can't remember. If I take melatonin, and I don't know if you guys know this, but if you do take melatonin, it actually increases the vividness of your dreams. If you guys do dream, feel free to take a melatonin, because it makes your dreams go crazy. Though be careful, because studies show that melatonin, if you are a vivid dreamer already, it can lead to sleep paralysis. And if you don't know what sleep paralysis is, it's essentially where you wake up but your body is still asleep, and that is where you start seeing like shadowy fingers. shadow fingers. Yes. No, it's where you see shadow figures at the end of your bed or standing in a corner, essentially like that. Where in reality, just to put your mind at ease, if you do have sleep paralysis, it is generally just your mind creating that image because you're still in a dreamlike state. And yes, it is possible to dream with your eyes open. That is what hallucinations basically is. Again, here's another fun fact. If you don't sleep for 48 hours, it is equivalent to having 3 glasses of wine. And with that, you may get hallucinations because your brain is so tired that it cannot decipher reality to the dream. With depersonalization disorder, some symptoms can be really distressing, and they can even last to a few moments, but can come and go over many years. Usually if someone is in a dissociative state, it's kind of like, where someone's out of it and you wave your hand in front of their face, you're like, hey, like, are you here? They don't actually seem present. I kind of went through a dissociative state in university, but that was more due to depression. If you have major depression, you can get symptoms of dissociation. Not saying that it's depersonalization disorder, but people who have depression do go into dissociative states, which is essentially because they're so overwhelmed, so stressed, or so depressed that they just don't really know, like, what is life anymore. Like, what, like, the whole thing where, like, people are like, oh, what is life? Like, what's the point? You know what I mean? So you kind of go into this autopilot mode of doing your day-to-day things, and it's just, like, nothing, But yeah, so depersonalization disorder, I haven't met anyone who has it. I don't know. Like I said, I'm only talking through what my textbooks told me and through what my professors told me. It is essentially just like, think of yourself like you're in a dreamlike state, but you're actually in real life. The best way I can explain it is if you have a lot to drink, when you're drunk, you can kind of get in that dreamlike state. But again, you don't know what it is unless you have it yourself. So I can only say so much, you know what I mean? Also, with depersonalization disorder, you can get derealization, which is also the world may seem unreal, which is like you may touch something and not understand why it's there. You may just like be in your waking life. Like right now, if I was having a derealization, I would be like, nothing is real. I am dreaming. I don't know. That's essentially what it is. So with all of these disorders, since there is not much research on it, there is not any treatments for it. So, well, there is treatments for it, but there is no cure. If you have DID, if you have derealization disorder or dissociative amnesia, there is no cure for it. You are stuck with it for the rest of your life. You will only learn how to cope with it. One of the treatments is talk therapy, which is essentially psychotherapy, which can also be CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where it's essentially you talk through your problems and you try and work out where you can work. It's essentially identifying the traumatic thing that caused DID in your life and trying to work past it. Also, you will learn to try and manage your alters or stuff that just, happens depending on what you have. Also, there is the way the treatment does try and involve merging all of your separate identities into one single identity. So it's essentially trying to get your split brain personality get put back into one, because in the end, even though if you have 5 or 6 alters, it is still the same brain, and it's just your brain trying to protect itself in any way it can, even though it's still one brain, Medication can help, but it only helps if you have another mental health issue going on, because, usually when you go through something traumatic, you might develop anxiety, you might develop depression, or PTSD, anything like that. So you can possibly go on antidepressants, anti-anxiety, and in very, very severe cases, if your alters are, acting out, trying to kill someone, like in Split, you will get put on antipsychotics, but most of the time it's proven that they are ineffective. So although treating dissociative identity disorder may be difficult, people do learn how to cope with it in their lives, but you do have to, try and do that, you know what I mean? Regardless, that is basically it on everything that is dissociative identity disorder. Like I said, going back to social media, there is a lot of people faking it. It is not fun when people do fake it. I remember, I forget her username, but she got canceled for having all these altars, and then her family came out and actually exposed her and said, no, this is all a lie, and she actually got like ridiculed off of social media. So don't fake mental disorders for views, all right? I know social media, you can literally fake everything nowadays, but like, don't fake mental disorders. There's a whole reason why people don't like talking about it and why there's a huge stigma around it. So don't do that. So some of you may be wondering, well, what if I start dating someone who has DID? Are we just going to be thrown into a polyamorous relationship because a different alter likes someone else? No, that's usually not the case. And again, with alter ego, he actually does have a wife, or I think a girlfriend on there, and essentially they are all dating the girlfriend. Though I'm pretty sure one of his alters is asexual. If you don't know what asexual is, it's where you don't where you won't love someone romantically, where you don't feel the need to kiss them, you don't feel the need to, have intercourse. It's essentially where you just have no romantic feelings for anything or anyone. Though he is still dating like the girlfriend. I guess if you do find someone who has DID, I guess it's up to you if you want to deal with it or not. I'm not saying that in a mean way, but what I am saying is that it is pretty hard. If you are dating someone with, say, 3 separate personalities and one personality absolutely hates your guts, it's pretty hard to get around that. But the number one thing you can do if you do know someone who has DID in your life is support them and help them work through their different identities, and just let them know that you are there for them no matter what identity they are going through, But with that being said, this is a short episode today because there's not much I can really talk about on the matter. But like I said, I would absolutely love to interview someone who does have this disorder. But with that being said, I'll leave you with this fun fact. Did you know if you yawn in a room full of people, whoever yawns right after you, it means that they were staring at you, because yawning triggers something in the brain where if someone is looking at you while you yawn, your instinctive reaction is to yawn back. So if you think someone has a crush on you or think someone is looking at you, just make a yawn as convincingly as possible, and then look around the room. If you see anyone else yawn, they were most likely staring at you. So it's pretty interesting. Also, I guess a separate little fun fact, since this episode is so short, is that if you are talking in a group full of people, like if you're all standing up and talking, look down and see where people's shoes or feet are pointing. If people's feet are pointing towards you, it means that they are fully interested in what you're talking about. If they are facing away from you, but their body is turned to you, it means they are not interested in talking to you anymore. And ironically, if one foot is facing you and another one is turned away, it means that they're half involved. And this is a body language thing that is a subconscious act that people will do if they are not interested in talking to you. So next time you're talking in a group full of people and you're telling a really interesting story, just look down at people's feet and see if they actually care about your story or not. With that being said, everyone, thank you so much for coming back to an episode of JJ Time. Again, I hope your new year is well. I hope each and every one of you are doing your New Year's resolutions amazingly. And if you like this episode, feel free to give it a like, rate it 5 stars, subscribe, depending where you're watching. I love the numbers. They make me feel great. But with that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day or night or whenever you are watching. And on the next episode, we are going to be talking about borderline personality disorder. So with that being said, you guys, thank you so much for coming to Just Justine Time, and I'll see you in the next episode.